Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Megan Husley, and I want to thank you in advance for participating in this month's webinar. As some of you may know, we provide complimentary webinars on a monthly basis that feature a variety of talent management topics. The topic of today's webinar is Employee Engagement, Strengthened Commitment, or Broken Promise. Our presenter today is Laura Hastings, Director of Learning and Development here at TalentQuest. I just want to thank everyone in advance for participating, and I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Laura.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks to all of you who have joined the webinar today. As Megan said, I'm Laura Hastings, and I'm one of the consultants here at TalentQuest. My background is in the study of human behavior as it relates to learning and organizational effectiveness. So learning and helping others to learn is one of my passions. Employee engagement is one of my favorite topics because no matter what industry you're in, engaging your workforce will bring greater success. This is our outline for what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to discuss what engagement is and is not. We're going to talk about the current reality. We're going to talk through making the case for engagement and the foundation of engagement. We're going to discuss 4 crucial requirements for engagement, briefly discuss some factors that could undermine any engagement effort, and then finally we'll get to what it's going to take for you to cultivate engagement in your culture. So what engagement is not? Engagement is not employee satisfaction, employee morale, or employee happiness. Early trends were to do satisfaction surveys in organizations, and there's nothing wrong with a satisfaction survey, as you've probably done or been a part of or completed in an organization. Satisfaction surveys involve questions like, I like it here, I enjoy my job, my work is satisfying, and those are all fine questions to gauge satisfaction in an organization, but the trend is now moving away from gauging satisfaction and measuring actual employee engagement. So what is employee engagement? It's really the connection people feel towards their work that leads to higher performance, commitment, and loyalty. It's an emotional commitment to the organization, and not just the organization, but the goals of the organization, working towards those. It's an alignment between not only job satisfaction, but job contribution. Not only are you happy, but are you actually contributing? It's a willingness to use intellectual effort for organizational success. And it's an attitude shift from what can I get to what can I give. This is just a funny video that I believe is a less than engaged workforce.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
Mr. Delaney's office. Oh, hello, Mr. Delaney. You're not feeling well? I'm sorry. Yes, I can have that ready for you, and you'll be stopping in to pick it up? Oh, you'll stop in tomorrow. And what about the big presentation today at 2 o'clock? Absolutely, I'll have him conference you in from home. Okay. Feel better, Mr. Delaney.
FedEx, proudly bringing you the FedEx Cup.
While each of these employees clearly had somewhere else they'd rather be, engaged workforces actually work whether the boss is there or not. So if you think about what am I looking for when I am looking for engaged employees, how can I tell if they're engaged? Here are a couple of ways to do that. Engaged employees show what we call discretionary effort. Discretionary effort is a term that emerged several years ago, meaning the difference in the level of effort a person is capable of compared to what that person is required to do to just get by. So it's the difference between doing just what you have to do and actually going above and beyond. Engaged employees display initiative and are self-directed. They're enthusiastic about their work. They work towards the organization's objectives. And really, I guess we would call them the easy employees. It's those employees that no matter what happens, they're always willing to help. They never have performance issues. just those that don't cause any kind of problem. Let's take a look at the current reality that really makes it important for organizations to embrace and study the concept of engagement and work towards improving it. No matter what industry you're in, workforces are leaner. There's uncertainty in the economic environment. Market forces are continually changing. And the workforce is changing due to the generational shifts. We have more generations in the workforce today than ever before. Because of all of this, change has actually become the norm. There was a study done by the Society of Human Resource Management that put out some information where they asked employees to answer this question. What percentage of employees report being satisfied in their current jobs? Here were our options, and what I'd like for you to think about is if you had to do a satisfaction survey in your organization today, where do you think you would fall? The answer is actually 83%. So the study that was done found that employees are satisfied in their current role. That might have something to do with the economic climate, and you would think that this is a good thing. But remember, the trend is moving away from measuring satisfaction and shifting more towards measuring engagement. So, similar study, what percentage of employees report being engaged in their current job? Thinking about your organization, how do you think you would answer that today? The answer is 29%. That means that 71% of the workforce is not putting in the discretionary effort that we talked about. They're merely doing just what it takes to get by. So you have 71% in your organization who are just doing what it takes to get by, and only 29% going above and beyond. There's some other statistics around age in the workforce and what percentage they are engaged. So you have from 18 to 29% are 32% engaged, 30 to 44, 28%, 45 to 64, 28%, and 65 and up, 44%. While there's some variation in these numbers, what this tells me is that organizations are not doing a good job with cultivating a culture that breeds an engaged workforce. So it's saying that no matter what your age, they're not doing a great job in finding out what it's going to take to get you committed to the organization. Some other statistics are around education, the level of education and how engaged that person is. Notice very similarly, it's a very even numbers. So it's saying that even though we have a workforce that contains all levels of education, there's really, the statistics are very similar to the other statistics, not a very engaged workforce. There are also measures around the cost of low engagement. So in 2010, Gallup did a poll about what the costs were when workers are not very engaged. What was the cost in low productivity? In thinking about your organization and the number of employees that you think are putting forth discretionary effort versus just getting by, what do you think it's costing you? According to this study, it's costing $300 billion per year in lost productivity, and this is in the United States alone. Now that we've looked at some of the statistics measuring workforce engagement in order to kind of get a hold of what that current reality is out there, let's talk about what it's going to take to make the case and bring focus around the concept of engagement. Trends in Global Engagement in 2011 published this quote: "Organizations with high levels of engagement 65% or greater, continued to outperform the total stock market index and posted total shareholder returns 22% higher than average in 2010. What's interesting to me about this quote and this statistic is that in many organizations, there are executive teams who are really focused on what it's going to take to increase shareholder value. So that's where they put their focus, is in getting shareholder returns. Well, the organizations that actually have higher engagement and higher returns have basically flipped that model around and said, forget shareholder returns. Now, the deal is they're not really forgetting shareholder returns. They're just actually choosing to focus on another area, and that's their employees. So what ends up happening is they focus on their employees, make sure that they're engaged, they have the tools they need to do their job, and they're loyal. Those employees, in turn, take care of the customer. The customer is happier. And then really it's the customer who's impacting the shareholder value, because really it's only the customer that can do that. Some other information around the impact of high engagement. Organizations report increased customer loyalty, increased profitability, decreased safety incidents, decreased absenteeism, and decreased defects, or an increase in quality. This is according to a Gallup study. And I'm sure no matter what industry you're in, I can only imagine that any one or more of these as an improvement would benefit your organization and have an impact. Best Buy actually measured impact, and they were able to discover for every 1/10 of a point in boosted employee engagement, the store saw a $100,000 increase in operating income. Now, every good presentation has to have a slide with a graph on it, so here it is. This slide is basically telling us our voluntary turnover trends in the United States, comparing how many people quit versus how many people were laid off. What this is telling us is that no matter, there's really no better time to be thinking about engagement, because as the economy begins to improve, the risk becomes that those employees who are not engaged are really just biding their time until they can leave for a greener pasture. Now let's focus on the foundation of engagement. What has to be in place for engagement to actually occur? So what we're talking about is the shift that needs to take place, moving from compliance to commitment. It's moving from the just getting by in order to actually put forth the extra effort. There are 4 crucial requirements to be in place for engagement to be a reality. These are 4 statements that your employees need to be able to say in order to know that they are part of the organization. They need to be able to say, I am valued. I have opportunities to grow and develop. I understand the connection, and I am empowered. We're going to look at each one of these individually. The first one is you show me I'm valued. What that means is that as an organization, you make sure that every employee knows that they bring value to you and the organization. You know, a lot of talk has been out there about Southwest Airlines. They're always being talked about. They're constantly on the top 5 most admired companies in the United States. One of the things that Southwest Airlines has done so well is showing their employees how much they value them. Now, I would go ahead and tell you that they actually do all 4 of these things very well, but with regards to showing you that you're valued, it's interesting to note that Herb Kelleher, the former CEO of Southwest Airlines, used to walk the halls of the company every day. If you were to read the book, The Southwest Airline Way, it actually documents their journey of becoming the organization that they are today. Herb knows the employees by name. He calls them by name. He asks them about their families. What they've been able to do is actually create a culture that is a sense of family. Of course, they encourage them to have fun. as any family would. As if anyone has flown Southwest Airlines, they know that they do like to have fun, but they're also very, very efficient, and they like what they do. In fact, there's a story in the book that talks about when Southwest Airlines was going through some difficult times, and Herb Kelleher pulled everyone in and said, I think we're going to have to lay people off. And the employees said, give us some time. Let us figure out a way where we won't have to do that. We're a family. And so what they did is they all pulled together and asked, instead of laying off a percentage of people, if he would just reduce everyone's salaries by a certain percentage. They also asked him if they could start looking for ways to save money. And one item they found is that they found out that Southwest Airlines was paying a lawn service to mow the lawn at their corporate office. The employees thought that was crazy to be paying money for a service like that when they were in troubled times, so they asked Herb if he would let that company go, to which he did. And the employees would show up on Saturdays with their own lawnmowers and mow the grounds at their corporate office. So what happened in turn with Herb is he let them know how much he valued them as individuals, and in turn they came back and pulled together as a family for the organization. Another example of showing someone how much they're valued comes from Gulf States Paper Corporation. I had the privilege to work with that organization around this initiative, and it's an interesting story about a plant. Gulf States actually had plants across the United States, 7 plants in 7 states, and a new manager went into one of the plants, young. The plant manager had retired. He was taking over for that plant manager. And sadly, when he was placed in that plant, he was told by the executives, you know, this plant has historically been our lowest producing plant, and they know that. And we want you to be able to turn it around, but chances are you probably won't be able to turn it around. We want you to try. But just so you're aware, we're looking at everything across the board, and we're going to start doing some cost-cutting measures. And there's a chance your plant will not be in existence a year from now. And so faced with this young plant manager had to go in and figure out just what he could do to make a difference. Now, he had a budget, and of course he could have hired some fancy consultant to come in and tell him what was broken in the process and start pulling paperwork of what needed to be done. But instead, this young man hired a photographer. And what he asked every plant employee to do is to come back to the plant for a 3-day stretch. They had to find a time that they could be at the plant between 10 in the morning and 10 at night for a duration of, let's say, a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. And he said, all you got to do is be here just for just a few minutes. I want to offer you a free family picture. Well, he had heard about a photographer in this town that was making great strides and just some really interesting things that they were doing with photography. So it wasn't like a sit-down pose photography studio. It wasn't like that at all. What this young photographer was doing was actually capturing candids of each of the families as they interacted, as they kind of sat for the photo or got ready to sit for the photo. People in the plant brought grandchildren. They brought their pets. They brought anything that was important to them in their lives, any member of their family, whether they have 2 legs or 4. So this photographer took pictures of each of the families. A picture was provided to each of the families, but then this plant manager did something different. He took each of the pictures of every employee in the plant, and instead of those hotel photos that are in, that you find hanging over beds in hotels with the rivers and the bushes, that's what was lining the walls of the halls in this plant. He removed all of those. He removed all of those inspiring posters that said things like quality, teamwork, cooperation. He took all of that down and framed pictures of every employee that he had, basically with their family. Once he did that, and as the halls of this organization were lined, there was kind of a buzz in the air, and people couldn't believe that he actually had done that. And he had a plant meeting. And as the people came into this meeting, he said to them, you spend more time with me than you do with the people who you've brought here to have their picture made. And I want you to know I appreciate that. We're faced with a pretty serious situation in the fact that we're the lowest producing plant. And there is a chance we won't be here a year from now. And I was hired to not find the solution, but I was hired to help you find a solution. What he did is he actually just took blank poster board and he placed them throughout the plant, And at the top of the poster board, it had topics like process efficiency, quality opportunities, customer issues. He even placed a couple of blank poster boards up in areas with question marks on them for employees to identify what they thought the issues were. And he asked each of the employees, please join a team. We've got to have some conversations. We've got to have some action around what can we done to help our efficiency and make sure we are a profitable plant. So all of that work was being done, and in 7.5 months, it was actually 7.5 months from the time the photographer was there, this plant was the top producing plant of the 7 within the organization. And in fact, many of the plant managers who used to make fun of this plant because they were the top producing plant actually traveled to this facility to find out what in the world this young kid who was hired to be a plant manager did to turn it around so quickly and so drastically. And while that might not be a solution in all industries or in every organization, it's just an example of how one person said, instead of worrying about the processes, instead of worrying about all the things that are out there, I'm going to worry about my people. And when I can get them on board and show them that I care about them, then they're going to help me. And I find that a great example. So in moving forward, employees know they're valued when you tell them that what they're doing adds value to the organization. You provide regular feedback on how they're doing. You show them that they matter to you and the organization. And you seek their opinion and their input. So that's the first of the 4 requirements. The second is you provide me opportunities to grow and develop. Now, many people have heard about Chick-fil-A. They always provide financial assistance to their employees who want to attend college. So I believe they award $1.65 million in scholarships. That was in 2012. Now in Intel, people move positions every 18 to 24 months. It is to encourage them to explore different fields. I like this also. New hires at Intel are told, welcome to your next 5 jobs. At General Mills, 85% of the officers in place were promoted from within. They grew inside the organization. And then as you see Google, everyone in Google is encouraged to spend at least 1 day a week or 20% of their time working on a special project. Now, because of my background in learning, I would love to say that growing and developing opportunities was the same thing as training, but it is not. Growing people can take place in and out of a classroom. And what I've just described is a lot of out of the classroom opportunities. Find ways to grow people in your organization and stretch them a little bit. So your employees can say, I know I'm growing when you give me opportunities to learn new skills. You allow me to master old skills. You provide me challenging assignments, even if it requires extra effort. Remember, that's the effort they're willing to give if they're challenged. You give me feedback, and you allow me to see my progress along the way. Now, I want to say one quick thing about feedback. I think the word feedback has a negative connotation associated with it, and I do a lot of work with organizations who want to help their managers and supervisors get better at delivering feedback. What I want you to think about is no matter what the definition is of feedback that you go to, whether it's Wikipedia or Webster, feedback is really just information that you provide to another person. And it's interesting that culturally, a lot of times feedback is perceived as a negative thing. It's perceived as, you're going to give me some criticism. So one of the best practices you can do to adopt and helping others to grow is provide them information on how well they're doing, as well as what they may consider doing to improve. So work towards creating a culture where feedback is not a negative, doesn't have a negative connotation associated with it. Feedback's just information. I'm sharing some information with you. And learn to master that. The third of the requirements is you help me understand the connection. One of the things that's really interesting, and I believe it was someone like Maslow who studied this, people want to be a part of something larger than themselves. That's just a basic human need. So when you connect the bigger picture for people in your organization, and they understand it and understand how they fit into the organization and that connection, then they're going to be more engaged employees. Now, I understand that more than likely not anyone on the call actually operates an amusement park or works somewhere that's as fun to work as Disney World, but there's a lot of learning that we can take from what Walt Disney has created. Walt Disney employs more than 60,000 people. And one of the interesting things about what they do in order to help people understand the connection is basically every employee has one job description. And that's we create happiness. So everyone in the organization knows that's their role, is to create happiness. Now, imagine the popcorn seller who's sitting at Disney World. It's hot. He works all day in front of the castle. He pops the corn, boxes the corn, sells the corn. And then he pops some more, boxes some more, and sells some more. Now, if he considered that that was his job, what do you think his level of satisfaction would be? What do you think his level of engagement would be? Well, the deal is he's not a popcorn salesperson. He is someone who is placed in that park to create happiness. And so when a child tugs on his father's arm and says, "Can we have some popcorn?" and the father says yes, this young popcorn seller is part of that equation. He has just made the day of this child who had decided he wanted popcorn at Disney World. And so because Disney can actually make sure that every single one of their employees knows that they are connected to the bigger picture, no matter how trivial the task or the assignment, they are connected to the big picture of being able to create happiness for the guests who are inside the park. Of course, as an organization of psychologists, we have to have something from Nietzsche. He who has a why to work can tolerate almost any how of the work. And so what that's saying is that this young popcorn popper knew that he created happiness. That's why he was there. And how he was going to do it, he was going to pop it and box it and sell it. So your employees know they get a connection when you share the strategy of the organization or even just the department. You're going to tell them how they fit into this strategy. You tell me if there are any challenges ahead for the organization or for the department. You involve me in how to overcome these challenges, and you provide me information regularly. The fourth and final requirement is you empower me. Now, Tony Hsieh from Zappos, the CEO, actually wrote a book called Delivering Happiness, and if you've ever read it or if you have a chance to read it, you will get a lot from it. A quote from that book is, "We don't measure call times and we don't have scripts because we trust our employees to use their best judgment in dealing with each and every customer." It's interesting to know a lot of customer service organizations do have scripts and they do measure call times. And the sole purpose of each of these customer service agents is to get off the phone with the customer instead of staying on the phone with the customer. And remember, we talked about the customers really how the shareholder value is going to be impacted. And so Zappos has been able to create a really neat culture where every person in that organization is hired and they trust them to do what they know is right for the company and for the customer. There's an example in the book where they made sure that the customer service agents knew, do whatever the customer wants. And there's a story of someone who called in to buy some shoes and hearing that the customer service agents don't have a script and hearing that they're supposed to do anything to keep the customer happy, asked the customer service agent if he would order him a pizza. And the customer service agent asked him what kind of pizza he wanted and where he would like to have it ordered from and what city he lived in and his address. And within about 40 minutes, there was a pizza delivered to that gentleman's house. There's also an example of someone else knowing that a customer service agent has to do anything you ask, and he asked the customer service agent to only refer to him in third person. So I believe the call went something like this: "I would like for you to refer to me in third person. My name is John." And the customer service agent said, "All right, what would John like to do today?" And John said, I would like to buy some shoes. And the customer agent said, what kind of shoes would John like to buy? And so the call continued to go like that. Zappos has hundreds of stories of customer service, and if you've ever ordered from them, you know exactly what you're getting. The other thing that's really interesting too, when you talk about how do they find these people who are always going to do what's right? How do they find people who can use their best judgment? Because I know many of us struggle with our workforces thinking, I would be scared to take the script away from our customer service agents. And I understand that. One thing that's interesting about when you interview for Zappos is that they send a driver to pick you up and bring you into their office. And you interview, and then you leave. The driver takes you back to the airport. And what's interesting is the only way you can get a second interview is if you actually interacted with that driver. If you treated the driver as a driver, then you will not be asked to come back. If you treated the driver as a human being, engaged with them, interacted with them, asked them where they're from, asked them how long they had lived there, then you get a second interview. Because then at that point, Tony knows you're the kind of person that he wants to hire. So your employees are going to know they're empowered when you give them the freedom to operate in a sense that they see appropriate. You show them that you trust them to operate autonomously. You check with them regularly about what they might need. You provide them the tools they need to be successful. And you remove obstacles that could get in the way of the success. Those are the 4 critical components of engagement. So let's talk just really quickly about the factors that undermine engagement. There are some factors that can really be detrimental when you're talking about trying to create this culture of an engaged workforce. The first of those is organizational changes, but I have to tell you, we know that change is constant. So it's even more important than ever to make sure that your leaders of your organization are given the information and the tools to help you build this engaged workforce, to do these foundational activities. The organizational changes and how your leaders are going to respond to that kind of speaks to the second bullet of the behaviors of the executives, the managers, and everyone's colleagues. It's the whole walk the talk, making sure that the executives and managers are doing what they can and you're building consistency in your organization about these practices. You know, employees shouldn't know what you're trying to do is build engagement. What you do is you actually do each of these items, educate your managers, give them the tools they need, and it will happen organically. Now, the organizational PP&P is referring to the policies, procedures, and protocol. And we understand that every organization has to have certain policies in place, but I invite you to look at some of the policies that you have. Look at some of the protocol that you have. See if there's anything in that that could be holding your employees back from being able to be engaged. You know, we found that bureaucratic organizations have some of the lowest engagement scores. You've always got issues with work-life balance that you have to deal with. And then there's something called drive-by interventions. And what we mean by that is basically you saying, I'm going to do something about engagement. And you try to do something quickly or haphazardly just to say you did it. It's kind of like a Band-Aid on a broken arm. It's important to understand engagement, understand what's really going on in your culture, find the root cause of that, and put a plan in place that's a long-term plan, not something just to check the box. So, cultivating engagement. So that's the bottom line. What is it that we have got to do to make sure we're building engagement in our organization? Because now is the time. What we have to do is increase communication. Do what we call lead with questions. Encourage development and build relationships. These are all actionable items that, when done, will cultivate engagement in your organization. We're going to talk about these each individually, but what's important to remember is that this is going to be critical, that each of your leaders is equipped with what they can do in each of these 4 areas, because it's only through your leaders that a culture can be transformed. The first of those is increased communication. Communicate often and clearly. Organizational status, performance status, the view of the future, how the employee fits in, how and why the employee is valued, and help your employees to understand the why around the what of their day-to-day functions. What's important to remember around communications is that so many times organizations communicate what they think is best to communicate. And a lot of times that's not exactly what the employee needs to know. As you're drafting communication going forward, consider the communication through their lens. What is it that they need? Instead of filtering out what you think should be done, I guess put the shoe on the other foot and see what it is that's most important to them to know. Lead with questions. What we ask is that you solicit feedback from employees on a regular basis. Ask what's going well, what's not going well, what do you need from me, how can I help? Get curious and commit to follow up. Now, I will tell you this, if you're currently operating in an organization that's not accustomed to soliciting feedback and asking questions of its employees, then a 180-degree shift could potentially scare them. So I encourage you to start slowly and operate from the mindset of curiosity. It can seem less intimidating at first. So for example, Bob, I was wondering how your day went. Were there any hiccups that I could probably help you with? Or Susan, I'm curious, what's the easiest part of your job? So a lot of times this is a management connection, being able to talk through what's actually happening in the organization. So from a curiosity standpoint, instead of a fact-finding or that kind of feel, just get curious with your people. The other thing that's critical here is if somebody tells you something that's new information, make sure you follow up to whatever it is that they're telling you or requesting. It's interesting, if you lead with questions, you can only get smarter with the answers that are provided to you. Encourage development. So like we said, development doesn't have to be in a classroom. It can be both in and out of a classroom. When you're thinking about development in your organization, try to align employee roles and responsibilities with their strengths. Allow employees room to fail and succeed without punitive consequences. I know that's really tough, and in certain industries it's hard to allow a goof up because it can cost a lot of money. So I encourage you to find those areas where failure would be okay. Exploration and trying out new things would not cost a lot of money. See what those are and encourage people to do that. Engage in conversations about career pathing. Just ask employees, what do you want to do? Remove obstacles to success whenever possible. And make sure there's opportunities for development whenever possible, whether it's serving on a special team, working on a project, or actually taking a class. And then the final item we have is to build relationships. One of the biggest factors in employee loyalty and engagement is the relationship that they have with their manager. And you've probably heard this before, but employees leave managers, not companies. So we say get to know your employees personally. Spend time with them. Find ways to show them that you care about them. And I'm not talking about holding hands around a campfire. But if you make this important for your leaders, they can actually individually determine what this looks like for them. It could be that they get together and brainstorm ideas. You could find a manager who does this well and then be able to share the ideas and make sure that it's personal for each person, because the ultimate goal is allowing each manager to start the process of building more relationships. Now, one of the reasons that's important is because of this study of the effect of manager relationships on an employee's intention to stay. The question was posed, my manager really cares about my well-being, and the options for answering range from strongly agree to strongly disagree. There was a correlation that was done between the percentage of the people who said, based on this question, how would they be with the organization within 1 year. So what this is saying, of the employees who said, my manager really cares about my well-being, and they strongly agreed, 94% of those said they would be with the organization in 1 year. And it goes down from there to where in the strongly disagree category, so if an employee said, my manager, they do not agree, my manager cares about my well-being, only 43% said that they would be with the organization in 1 year. So it is important to know that this is a critical piece of the puzzle. So make engagement part of your culture. Commit to increasing the frequency and the amount of information that's shared with employees. Communicate. Commit to getting information from your employees. Get curious. Commit to growing your employees, development, and commit to getting to know your employees, the relationships. Follow through on each of this and display a year-round focus. It's important to not make this a flavor of the month. And remember, your employees shouldn't know you're trying to increase engagement. They see you increasing communication. They see you increasing the number of questions you ask. They see an increase in their opportunities. And they see an increase in the relationships that they have. They're going to see all of that, and what you're going to see is results.
Okay, thank you, Laura. We appreciate the presentation. I think it was a great overview on employee engagement, and hopefully we've all learned a few things here. I'm sure we have. So again, I just want to thank everyone for your participation, and we will look forward to hearing or seeing you log in next month at our next webinar.